맞습니다. 도마, 아주, 어, 그다, 그 유명한 그 수요일에 베베 수만 가는 무시다. 안다.
First of all, I would like to offer my greetings to
요즘
the
수요일 무시.
uh, masters who have come, Kyabje Suraman Rinpoche, Bhagar Choto Rinpoche,
미교를 무시.
Mingyur Rinpoche,
남배 위에
uh,
수주나 맞다.
who as representative of all the gurus, all Kempo Loaded Dunya, as well as all the Kempos and masters and spiritual friends, all the masters, all the monks and nuns, as well as all the faithful people who have come from different directions. I'd like to offer you my greetings.
다 드네마 실제 다당 아주 조지 남다 마시고요 아래.
Now we will continue with our teachings on Atisha's teachings, continuing from where we left off yesterday.
다 되래야. 드린디 쉬야다 조지 남다 그 dom도 쉬위미나.
So if we'd like to give a summary of Atisha's life,
주 마시에 바르도네 베 이게
until he reached the age of 10, he studied grammar and crafts and other common areas of knowledge.
다 되네 고노 미주지리야 나베게 바르도.
Then from that time until he was 20, he studied the great areas of knowledge, such as grammar and epistemology and logic and so forth. And then from the time that he was 21, he was a primary lay devotee with the 5 precepts. And so he had held the lay priesthood, and in particular, from the time that he was 22 on, he started to practice the secret mantra. He received empowerments and primarily practiced the secret mantra, becoming a yogi of the secret mantra. Now, the first Vajjan Guru, the first one who gave him the empowerment, was a guru named Rahula Gupta. Now, Rahula Gupta was also there's also among the lamas of the scholar in Siddha Khyumpo Nadra, there was also a Rahula Gupta in that list. Now, during the latter part of Khyumpo Nadra's life, when he had gone to Tibet and was performing various activity, he had a pure vision of Rahula, who came to give him precious instructions. And so he actually came bearing the instructions, and he imagined that he had the vision of him giving the empowerment initiation of 600 Mahar. And so because the Rahula Gupta, who was a guru of Kimpanajara, and the guru Rahula Gupta, who was Atisha's guru, were basically contemporaries. And among all the gurus that Atisha followed, the main one was Avadutipa. And he spent many years following Avadutipa, and he received many tantras and pith instructions of the secret mantra from him. Indicates from the time that he was 22 until he reached the age of 29, he studied many of the secret mantra, the tantras, and he practiced the Vajrayana. And he reached a very high level of tantric practice, and he also engaged in yogic awareness conduct for either 6 or for 3 years. And so he spent this time engaging in yogic awareness conduct. Now, when we say yogic awareness conduct, means that he took a consort to various unfixed locations, whether in the middle of a forest or to some various location. And then, having gone to these places, engaged in the yogic awareness conduct. Now, what it says in the commentaries and the tantras is that once has attained the level of the path of joining, you should engage in such practices. In any case, when Atisha was young, he practiced a lot of secret mantra practices. And so it's a little bit different than the other Mahasiddhas of the secret mantra. Most of them were first monastics and later went off into contact and went off into forests or isolated places and then engaged in yogic practices. But Ajisha was the different, it's the opposite. First, he did the practices of yoga, and then later he became ordained. And so this is like a different than the other Mahasiddhas of India. Now, when he reached the end of 29, he went forth and was ordained. And this is like our teacher, the Buddha Shakyamuni. His laws are very similar. They're the same. The Buddha went forth at the age of 29. If we say it flippantly, he became a monk. Similarly, Natisha, also at the age of 29, went forth and entered the Sangha and primarily was in a monastic. Now, next I'd like to speak about the circumstances that led to Atisha going forth. Now, as I mentioned before, while he was still a youth, he had practiced mantra and had many instructions on mantra. He had followed many gurus, he had received many mantra teachings, and he had practiced it himself. And so he had mastered all of the topics of mantra. He was like sort of both a scholar and a practitioner in the sutras, and in the tantras. He had studied widely, and he also had a lot of practice. And so his initial thought that he would reach Buddhahood in this lifetime solely through the tantric practice. His idea was that he'd spend his entire life as a yogi and devote himself entirely to practice. And so that seems to have been his initial intention. But one night, there were many different signs and visions that encouraged him to go forth. One night, he had a vision in a dream of a Heruka coming to the sky before him and said, "Child of noble family, you will not get anywhere through Avatutipa's conduct. You're not going to make it anywhere, basically. And so you need to go forth." If you go forth and in the future, where you have many monastic students, you'll have many monks and nuns as students. And so this was the prophecy that he received. That's one of the omens that showed him he should go forth. Now, another condition was, one night in a dream, he had the dream that he was in a big temple. The Bhagavan Shakyamuni was surrounded by a large sangha of bhikshus, and they were eating their midday meal. And Atisha himself was sitting at the very end of the row. At the head of the row, the Buddha was sitting. The Buddha looked down at him, he was looking at his disciples, and when he saw Atisha, he probably pointed his finger at him, probably. Something happened to that person, so he didn't go forth, right? So he had this dream of the Buddha saying this. And so there's another sign that he needed to go forth. There's another night that he saw Maitreya in a temple. Maitreya is normally wears the robes of a bodhisattva, like the jewels and the jewelry of a bodhisattva, but in his dreams, he dreamt of Maitreya wearing monastic robes of a bhikshu. And so he saw the Maitreya in the monastic robes in the temple, and when he went to him, Maitreya, what said to him was, Oh, this is a place for monastics to come. It's not a place for you householders to come. You weren't allowed in here. And so this is what he dreamt. And there are so many signs and omens that he should go forth that Atisha thought to himself, perhaps I really have to go forth. If I don't become a monk, it's not going to work out. And so there was a family from whom he rented a home when he visited Nalanda. And so the householder, the owner there, really knows the Dharma very well. And so there was this householder. And he asked him, he said, I want to go forth, I need to become a monk. But at that time in India, there are many different schools. There are many foundation vehicle schools. And so which one of the schools should you go forth in? Which one is good? He asked his householder. And when he asked this, then the householder who rented a room said, in the future, even if you're monastic, are you going to continue doing mantra practice or not? After you've gone forth, are you going to still practice doing tantra practicing after it, or are you going to stop doing Vajrayana practice? And so that's, we asked this question of Atisha in reply, and Atisha in response said, I'll go forth, but I'm going to continue doing tantric practice. The householder said to him, then among all the different schools, then it's best for you to enter the Mahasangika school. And so his opinion was that Atisha, that among all the different schools, that Atisha probably should enter the Mahasangika school because it's probably a little bit more relaxed. It's a little bit less strict. And so this is he said, in any case, he said that basically it's best for you to go forth in the Mahasangika school. And so that, given, and as according to that opinion, then Atisha at this age of 29, he was over at the Mahavihar, or the Mahatemple in Bodh Gaya. Now, some of them say that some of his life stories, he was born at Odantapuri temple. In any case, at the age of 29, he was ordained into the Mahasangika school. And within that, there are many different subdivisions of the Mahasangika. And so this is one of the, he was part of the main school of Mahasangika. His master was named Buddhajnana. This is probably the same lineage as in the lineage of Guhya Samaja, a very well-known master, And so, Buddhajnana was there was a master who had achieved the Kasapin and Rasada Shilarakshita. He was the Kempo or abbot who ordained Atisha. And when he was ordained, Atisha was given the Ditam Kara Shri Jnana. So Dipa means light, Kara means like a thing, Shri means power, and so Jnana means wisdom. And so this is why he's called Paramatma in Tibet. He makes the lamp light, the glorious makes the lamp light. Now, the people in the tradition of Buddhajnana would also have the word jnana as the last word in their name. And so for this reason, the last part of Atisha's name is also jnana, or wisdom. So in this case, at the age of 29, he went forth. As it says in Zhuangzhou's praise of Atisha, it says, without attachment to sensory pleasures, he left the wealth of royalty and became a picture of the Mahasangika school. I supplicate the glorious Atisha. And then on, from the time he's ordained on, there are many different rules for monastics. And we don't even need to mention the major ones. Even the smallest of the rules, even the most minor rules, he would refrain from breaking them. You wouldn't, like if there was a flour that had been stored in a clay pot. Now, of course, there wasn't samba, but it was like flour. If there's like the grains that they made them quite, you would not eat them. The reason for this is because clay pots were the containers that beer were made in. And so the Mahasangika would say that you couldn't drink, because it was like drinking alcohol. Even if there was even if there were no leftovers of beer in the pot, because beer is usually made in clay pots, there's a possibility there might be some remnants of it. And so the Mahasangika would not even. And the reason for this is that because the containers in which the beer was fermented, then there would be it was improper to drink from them. And this is the reason because the Mahasangika school considered that not drinking alcohol to be one of the root vows, as it is said. This is what they say, but if we look at the Vinaya of the Mahasangika school, there's no question of there being alcohol being the four vows. We usually talk about the 4 root plus alcohol, right? That's what we normally say. And when we're being very relaxed about the rules, we say that the 4, you can, other than the 4 root and alcohol, you can be more relaxed about the others, and sometimes, according to some people, and say that there's no point in root, but there are times when all of the others are allowed, it is said. However, but in the Mahasangika school, alcohol, not drinking alcohol is one of their root vows, or it's very close to this, it is said. However, when I looked at the Mahasangika Vinaya in the Chinese translations, when I looked at that, when I glanced through it, it seems that not drinking alcohol is not one of the root vows, but this is what was said. So next, I would like to speak about how Atisha was given his name, to explain the meaning of his name. First, as I said, the Atisha's name was Dipankara Sri Jnana. That was his monastic name. Dipankara Sri Jnana. So this is the name that his abbot gave him. There are many other names that are used for Atisha, and among them, the most common Sanskrit name is Atisha. So Atisha, when you translate Atisha into English, it means preeminent or the best. When you explain it, some of the Ati means like the action. Ashya means the intention. It means atyasha, or it means someone who has who has great altruism. Some people, when they explain it, another way to explain it, the ati means like extremely. Shanti means peaceful. When you put these two together, you've got atisha, and say atisha, then you mean extremely peaceful. Now, another explanation for this is that the word a means a yogi. That means the name of Avadutya. Peace means a great pandita. Sha means a great bhikshu or a great monastic, because that is in Sanskrit is called because it refers to the word for a great practitioner, Shramana, in Sanskrit. There's the letter Sha in the world. And so that's another way of explaining his name. So Atisha is actually his most well-known name. Now, how was he given this name, Atisha? Two different explanations of this. One comes from Penjil Sodak's History of the Katha lineage called The Ornament of the Mind. It said this name was given by Changchu the king Changchu. The reason why he given this name is that the Changchu saw that he was had superior knowledge and compassion. He also is a greater scholar than others, and he also had perfect compassion. So this person is superior to even the Panditas. That he had a great ability to eliminate the perfect teachings of the Buddha that were not good, and so as we called him by the name Atisha is like a title describing his greatness. Now another explanation comes Sakyapa Kungasunam's History of the Kadampa, called the Ocean of Wonder. And this is that there is the King Dharmapala, the king of the Pala dynasty. He recognized that Atisha was the greatest among all the Panditas and cities in India, so he invited him to Vikramashila and gave him the title of Atisha. So this is another explanation, but if this is the Dharmapala from the Pala dynasty, if he says Dharmapala, the Pala dynasty, then the time is not worked out because doesn't match because Dharmapala reigned in the 8th century. But I think that it's more logical that it was Chandra who gave Atisha his name. I think there are better reasons for that. I think it's probably closer to the actual fact, but it is still something that needs some research. In Tibet, the best known name for Atisha is the name Zhouje. When you say Zhouje, in central Tibet, in Lhasa, there are the two Zhou statues. We always say the Zhou, right? And there's the J that is added to the name. So when you say Zhou, now it doesn't have the ending J, but and more. Now it's said in Tibetan that sometimes that you say Zhou to your king or to your leaders. It's one way that you say it. Sometimes you say Zhou to those people who are older, senior to you. For example, among your siblings, the eldest son is called the Acho, the Chocho, or Jola. And so this also comes from the same way. Now, Zhou can also be understood, as I mentioned before, to the Buddha statue, like the Zhou in Lhasa, Buddha and the Sambhogakaya robes and ornaments. And so that's another meaning of the word Zhou. It's like the Buddha Shakyamuni, but he's wearing all of the ornaments and robes of a Sambhogakaya. So this is a particular type of statue that we call by the Zhou. In any case, in Tibetan, Zhou is primarily praise. The word of praise, it means like the main or the supreme person. Someone whom you consider to be extremely important. So it's for the people whom you have great regard, whether they're humans or gods, you say by the word Zhouche. In any case, it's showing that it's really treasuring this person, valuing them. And so for that reason, when he's called Zhouche in Tibetan, it's because Zhouche was did such great kindness for Tibet, and Tibet has been so important. And think of him as like an elder brother, as a great being. And so he's called Zhouche. So Zhouche. is for Tibetans. This shows like how close Tibetans feel to him. Just think of how much kindness, how much gratitude they have for his kindness. Instead of for anyone else, it's called Choje to show how they have like a great gratitude and such a great respect for him. And so I think this is how he was given this name. That is how he's given his name. The next thing is after on 4. So what studies did he engage in? He went forth at the age of 29, and then from 529 until he was 31, he studied with many different gurus, the texts of the Mahayana and the foundation vehicle. And normally, the places where he stayed most frequently were primarily Vikramashila Temple, as well as the Odantapuri temple. These were the best known monastic colleges or universities. Now, at that time, Vikramashila was extremely well known. And even at that time, Nalanda was not quite as well known. Vikramashila was actually even more famous than Nalanda and was it was at its height. And so among other places that he studied, most of it was at Vikramashila. There's also Odantapuri, the Odantapuri temple. Some people think that it probably was in the area of Bodhgaya someplace. And those two, during the time of Atisha's life, were the most well-known monastic universities in India. The main sponsors of both of these temples were the kings of the Pala dynasty. So Atisha studied primarily with the abbot Shilarakshita at Vikramashila. He studied the studies of Vinaya. From the foundations, they're called the 4 root schools. The reason we're talking about the root schools, I mean, these are the most well-known foundation vehicle schools at that time. There are these schools. There's the Mahasangika school, the Stadviravada school, the Samatya school, and the Vastavada school. So these are the 4 schools. And so we studied the Vinaya of these 4 schools. And their practices just each have their own slight differences, their own practices. So he's able to know all the different practices, and the distinctions in the practices of all the different schools. He was very well learned in all this. Likewise, at Odantapuri Monastery, the main guru he studied was named Dhammarakshita. So from Dhammarakshita, he studied the Great Exposition Treatise, the great text written by the Upagupta that was over 800 fascicles long. Now, normally you have to study this text for such a great, huge text, and you normally have to study for 7, 12 years. But Atisha was so diligent, he worked so hard that he actually studied in 7. The main thing that the Mahayana studied was that the main person who studied the Mahayana scriptures from was Master Shantipa. Shantipa was a Pandit who guarded the east gate of Vikramashila. At Vikramashila, the gates, the Pandit who guarded the gates in the 4 directions. The guardian of the east gate was Shantipa. And Rupa was the guardian of the north gate, right? This is why we call Rupa the guardian of the northern gate. And so Shantipa was the guardian of the eastern gate. He was called the omniscient one of the age of an age of strife in India. There are many of the Tibetan masters who had gone to India, including Trungpa Lhasa and Margaret Transit. Well, let's say, and many other gurus had studied with him. So he had a very great connection with Tibet. And at that time, after Naropa, the Mahabandit Naropa, Shantipa was said to be the best well-known scholar. So he was like number two after Naropa. Another thing that Atisha said is that at that time, there was not a whole lot of difference between Buddhist and non-Buddhist views. Because in Buddha in India at that time, in that period, the Unexcelled Yoga Tantra treatises go through, and there's a lot of, and they had a lot of common things within the non-Buddhist. There are many areas that were similarities between them. So at that point, very difficult to distinguish what was the difference between a Buddhist and a non-Buddhist view. There are many Buddhist masters who were unable to really clearly distinguish Buddhists and non-Buddhists. Atisha said that among, aside from him and Shantipa, there were very few. There really weren't anyone else who could distinguish between the Buddhist and the non-Buddhist. So at that time, Shantipa was a very well-known Pandita of that time. Similarly, Atisha, as I mentioned before, of course, as I said before, he studied not only at Vikramasila and Adantapur, he went to many different places and studied with many gurus. If we look at his lifestyle, what it says is that he went many across the oceans and sailed across the oceans. Central India, Sumatra, and Ceylon. He underwent many difficulties in order to study with different gurus. In any case, he's followed very many gurus in his life. You wonder how many. The different accounts in his biography, the different ways that it's explained, but the largest number that he followed 157 gurus. The lowest is that he studied with 30 lamas. Among them, there were the gurus who were like scholars and siddhas who both the scriptures and who had that actual realization. There were 12 gurus. So the 12 gurus were both scholars and siddhas. Talk about gurus that actually seen the truth as there were three. And these three were, there's the guru I mentioned earlier, Avatutipa. Now there is an older and a younger. The one that Atisha studied was probably the younger Avatutipa. Another was Kamalakshita, who was a practitioner of Yamantaka. And another one who studied was Naropa of Dompipa. Naropa student Dompipa. Dompipa, there's also an elder and a younger. The elder and younger. The older one is called the older one, and the later one is called the younger Dompipa. This is the Indian tradition, right? In any case, many different Dompipas. So the first one that are better known is called the older, the greater Dompipa. The later one was called the younger or lesser Dompipa. In any case, these are the three gurus who studied with, who had actually seen the truth. Studied the middle way view from Avatutipa, particularly the autonomist school of the Uttara school. Kamalarashita had originally been a mindfulness scholar, but later, when he developed the Pyathasigis, being an Assam, the nature of Dharmatana as it is, he became a middle way master. And so for this reason, and so he is another of the lamas who's continued to see the truth. The younger Drompa was not someone he met actually in person. When he went to look for younger Drompa, he didn't find him. But he had supplicated quite a bit. And because of that, in a dream, he saw a younger Drompa. And this dream is actually quite strange, because what has happened in his dream is he saw he was going to see Trungpa. He looking everywhere to find him, and he didn't find him. He supplicated, and then what happened is that in a dream, he saw Trungpa with two students, the three of them. This means that's the guru, and then two other monks were like a servant. Each of them was holding a skull cup. And they're holding, on the other hand, they're holding human flesh, and they're eating it. When Natisha saw this, and thought, what is this? What's strange? He kind of lost a little bit of faith. But this isn't good. And then, if you're monastics or in monastic robes, holding a skull, and in addition to that, eating human flesh, isn't that an offense? And then what Trungpa said was, Buddha, does the Buddha have any confusion? This is what Atisha said. And so Atisha said, no, and so then he dreamt that Trungpa gave him a piece of human flesh to eat, and when he ate it, but it is in a dream, he was given the human flesh, he said he ate it. And then he started to eat it's like the finger, the ring finger. And he said everything from the joint down, quite a bit of the finger. That's what he dreamt. And because of this dream, when he woke up, and then from the morning until he dreamt it into the night. He woke up. Until the noon of the next day, he stayed in samadhi. Natural samadhi that he's had. Resting in the enjoying the bliss of samadhi. Gentle and resting in equipoise. That occurred. But Atisha thought to himself, I spent such a long time on Atisha. This must have been the blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or is it the blessings of Trungpa? There's a little bit of a doubt about this. He kind of wondered which it was. Later, there was a mantra practitioner who went to Trungpa. So this is the Trungpa that Atisha had been looking for. So he went to Trungpa, and Trungpa said to him, you and I have no karmic connection. I have a student. I have a lama I've given blessings to. And his name contains the word jnana, or wisdom, as I said. As we said, Atisha's real name is Dipangkara Sri Jnana. So I have a student whose name contains the word jnana. See, I supplicated him in the past, and so at that time I gave him some blessings. I blessed him. You need to go look for him, because you should go to see him. He's the one that you have the karmic connection with, so go to see him. And so this is what Trungpa said. And then that Trungpa did as Trungpa said and went to see Atisha. And then supplicated him, please give me the Dharma teachings. He asked him, and then Atisha said him first, well, who sent you? Who sent you to ask for Dharma from me? When Atisha asked him that, then the mantra practitioner said, Trungpa sent me, and he told the story. He said, Trungpa said, we don't have karmic connection. You should go to this guru that I have. And when he explained the whole story, then only then did Atisha know that Atisha developing such great samadhi was being the blessings of Trungpa. He's wondering if it had been Trungpa blessing him or the Buddha. A little bit of doubt about that. After when you heard the entire story from the mantra practitioner, he said, And so for me to develop such great blessings in my being is because of Dampipa. So Atisha never did actually met Dampipa in person, but because he'd been blessed by him in a dream, he considered him to be one of his gurus. Likewise, among his gurus, Atisha had several who taught him bodhicitta. They're the ones who are really especially kind to him in terms of developing the bodhicitta, and there were three of them. So one of them was one called Dhammarakshita, one called Maitri Yogi, and one called Suvarnadvipa. If we talk about these three, then the first of these is Dhammarakshita. So generally, of course, but so Dhammarakshita and Maitri Yogi are like the sources for the mind training teachings that we get from the Competition. These are the really well-known scripts that we have. So these are like the actual source of these, are Dhammarakshita and Maitri Yogi. And so the first of them, Dhammarakshita, as I said before, all three of these gurus were masters of bodhicitta. They'd reached very high levels of practice of bodhicitta. Among them, Dhammarakshita, if we think about him, one day there was a person who had got sick. And in order to cure his medicine, what he needed as a medicine is that he needed to have some human flesh and blood. Because he eat this and stuff. And so it's very difficult for us to understand this. How can you cut off your own? It's very difficult to understand that you can cut off your own flesh. And how can you understand this? You wonder if this is actually true or what. It's difficult to understand. In any case, as Lama Dhammarakshita was not only a yogi who could practice through the practice of exchanging himself, but he's actually able to cut off his own flesh and blood and give it to someone who had that capacity to do that. It's a very high level of mind training practice. And then the second is Maitri Yoga. And so he's also a great master of bodhicitta. One time, saw someone beating a dog with an iron rod. He was really abusing that dog. And when he saw the guy abusing the dog, the Guru Maitri Yogi felt such great compassion for that dog that he took that dog's suffering, the pain of the dog, onto himself. So he took it onto his own body. Not only did he take them, he also completely took away all of the suffering of that dog, any sensation of suffering. When the person had been welts on the dog, where the dog on the dog's body from where it had been built, and those welts also disappeared, and they appeared on Maitri Yogi's body himself. So these also fell directly on him. And so then pus came out, and there was blood and pus that came out of them. Because of this, we can understand how high the level of Guru Maitri Yogi's practice of loving kindness and compassion was, because we can see that from the Buddha Suvarnadvipa is said to be like an embodiment of bodhicitta. It's like living bodhicitta. It's like he himself, as the Guru himself, is a living bodhicitta. So if we think about how level of Suvarnadvipa's loving kindness and compassion bodhicitta, how high it was, how high his practice was, not something we can't really say. Like among all the gurus that Atisha had followed, and the 150, and among them, the one for whom he personally had the greatest faith and the most deepest faith, and the deepest connection was this one, Suvarnadvipa. Suvarnadvipa.
Lama Selim Badir,
This Guru Suvarnadvip.
Lama Selim Begi, Lama Shendagi Tse Sumbe Kavliya, and Choji.
When you heard others Guru's name, then Patricia would join his palms at his heart like this. When you heard any other of his Guru's names, Jay would do this. He would join his palms in prayer at his heart. When he heard Suvarnadvipa's name, he'd immediately put his palms at his forehead and immediately start to shed tears. And so the moment he heard Suvarnadvipa's name, just hearing the name or something, think of the name, he just immediately shed tears. So for this reason, later, when George went to Tibet, the George's masters, you have many different masters, right? You have so many different gurus. Why is it that he has such a great faith and devotion for Suvarnadvipa? And what Atisha said in response is that just because it's not that there are any better, worse, or higher, or less qualities among my gurus. In terms of their qualities, they're all exactly the same. But Silingpa was the kindest of them to me. How had been so kind to me? Atisha replied then. My thought is the fact that I have a little bit of an altruistic feeling because of Suvarnadvipa's kindness. The fact that Suvarnadvipa had the bodhicitta of exchanging himself with others because they had not had the power to gain, and he gained it from Suvarnadvipa, and so for that reason we continued Suvarnadvipa and so important. Talking about the name Suvarnadvipa, that's actually the name of a place. It's actually, these days, it's in present day Indonesia, it's the island of Sumatra. Now, in the older days, it was called Suvarnadvipa. That means the island of gold, or the land of gold. In this latter half of the 7th century, the end of the around in the 680s, the Tang Dynasty transferred Yi Jing went there twice. And in both visits, he spent a total of over 2 years in his 2 visits. The reason it was called Suvarnadvipa is because that place is called Suvarnadvipa, and so for that reason, the master is called Suvarnadvipa. So today I haven't got a lot of time. I will not speak about how he met the Guru Suvarnadvipa. Last of all, I'd like to kind of give a bit of a summary. Before Atisha went to Tibet, after he went to Tibet, he became incredibly well known. But before he went to Tibet, so Atisha, how famous was he? How well known? How important was he? In terms of his knowledge, Atisha knew all the worldly areas of knowledge and craft, medicine, epistemology, and logic, grammar, Buddhist and non-Buddhist philosophies. In terms of the Vinaya of the Foundation, he was extremely well learned, very learned in Abhidharma, in the Mahayana Sutras. He had studied in full the philosophies of both the mind-only and middle way schools. He studied the view and conduct in the Darthan tradition, as well as the profound view of the lineage of the vast conduct that comes from the Sangam. He had received all of the presentations of that from the conduct of the vast conduct of the Sangam. He'd be very well learned in that. In any case, practiced the middle way view that had been passed on by Nagarjuna's successors, and the vast conduct of the mind only that had been passed on by him. He practiced these two in union, he practiced them together. And so because of him doing this, he's had a very strong influence in Tibetan Buddhism. Otherwise, in Tibet, normally, when you say middle way or middle way and mind only, I think they don't quite match each other, they don't fit each other. It's like the middle way, like completely refutes objects to the mind only objects to the middle way. But because of because of Atisha coming, we have both of these lineages, the lineage of vast conduct and the lineage of profound view. And because of them, and so this is like one of the strong influences of Atisha's life and example. So for that reason, we think about the tradition of bodhicitta. There's many practices that come from that lineage of vast conduct, the lineage of Asana. When we talk about the stages of path of three individuals, this is described in the five texts on the levels by Asana. We talk about we have the consequential view that's considered consequential view of Chandrakirti is considered extremely important, but this is also the influence of Atisha. And also in terms of the secret mantra, Atisha had studied and practiced all the fifth instructions of all four of the classes of Buddha. Before he went forth, he had practiced most of them, and even after them, he used to continue to study the mantra. And it's not only to study them, but to also see in the faces of many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, including Vajra, Chakrasamvara, Chenrisi, the king of arrangement, the arrangement of three Samajas, Lady Tara, and Achara, and among them. So, of course, Tara was his primary teacher. But basically, he was like to speaking to her, like we have conversations. Like, if you had a little bit of any doubt or problem, he'd immediately ask something, pray to her, and then his doubts would be resolved. That's for that reason, in terms of these qualities of his knowledge, in terms of his qualities of his monasticism and venerability, Atisha himself, I've never had any faults in my product, not even minor. He said, I've had a few occasional minor faults in the Bodhisattva. I've had many faults, but I've always immediately confessed them. Even within the space of a single session, I've always confessed them and restored them. So it's well known, venerable. And in terms of the goodness, he's very good. It's like he said, he made bodhicitta the core of his practice. And he came to the level, the pinnacle of the altruism. So this is considered like the pinnacle of bodhicitta and altruism. Particularly among all the Dhammas at this time, it's probably the most altruistic of all them. He was not at all a sectarian. He had great qualities of learning, and so among all of the all of the great masters, they would considered him to be one of the greatest scholars. He was respected by the masters of all the schools, and someone whom everyone asked to help them resolve their doubts. What Naropa said is that these days, you, the master of the teachings, is you, praising him as the master of the teachings, it is said, right? And so that's even before he had gone to Tibet, Atisha, before Atisha went to Tibet, he was also, they considered very well known. He was, so that's enough for today. So that's all I have to say for today.